Hey, Allison, how are you?
Hi, Andrea. Yeah, I'm really good. I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I feel so familiar because we talked yesterday, just just chatting, but not recording or anything, but that was really fun.
Yeah, no, it's nice. It feels like you've just been there and now we're here and another
Yeah,
episode for the new year, and it's really
caught
exciting.
up on Christmas. I know what you were reading. I know what you ate. I know where you
Yeah,
went.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
pretty good.
Virtual friends, eh? Thank the Lord for the virtual world in some ways.
I agree. That's that I do think about that sometimes. I think it's important to not replace in-person friendships with virtual friendships, but
Mm.
also we all live so far apart instead of, literally walking distance across from each other like we may have once in the past. So it is kind of nice to be able to have conversations off and on throughout the day with friends over social media or whatever.
Mm.
Um, I think it's good to have a combo.
I agree. I agree. And I
Yeah.
think when you have particular interests that the rest of the world doesn't necessarily have, it's a wonderful
Hmm.
way to find
Yeah.
in common. That's why I like it. So
Yeah.
I'm glad I found
And
you, and I'm
thanks
glad I found
to
everyone who
our
listens.
our virtual friends, the patrons of the podcast. Thanks to them for
Yeah,
finding us and helping
yeah,
us keep this show running on the road.
exactly, exactly. And we're coming with a bonus episode today. So
Yeah,
this is not our usual Tuesday posting because we've got something particularly special to share,
stoked about
which is
this.
kind of prepping the way for the whole of this year, hopefully. So, Andrea, as this was your wonderful idea, do you want to go ahead and explain what it is to people?
Yeah, well, like all good ideas, I stole it from somebody else. So nothing original, but I mentioned this in another recording we did, so you might hear me mention this twice if you're listening to
Mm.
every episode. Thanks if you are. But I am a patron of another podcast also. That's the Literary Life podcast, 1010 Recommend, and they have a reading challenge every year, which is awesome and has pushed me into reading new categories of books and things that I've never finished or felt too intimidated to read or just thought it was out of my wheelhouse. Well, I was sitting the other day and thinking, man, I wish there was a challenge for me in the kitchen like that would make me try
Hmm.
things that weren't in my wheelhouse or I'd been too intimidated by or aspects that I've just never touched. And then I thought, well, why don't I make one?
Yeah.
So I bounced this idea across the ocean to you, and then we threw together. You had ideas, I had ideas. I stacked them all together, removed the redundancies, and then there was 22 items on the challenge, which I thought was funny because it's 2022.
Yeah.
So we've got 22 challenges in a kitchen challenge for all of y'all, the 2022 Ancestral Kitchen Challenge. And the challenge topics are I wanted to put them together to spark, not to be a task for you and a drudgery, but to spark a creative fire. Just like the
Mm.
reading challenges for me, the reading challenge is pretty broad, read a book from the Victorian era or something like that. They're not giving me a specific title. That's kind of how I wanted this challenge to be. Like, um, make a fermented beverage. Okay, I'm not going to be really specific. Maybe you can't do milk kefir because of a certain
Hmm.
sensitivity, so you might choose, Allison's Suins or something like that.
Mm.
So um, I wanted it to be pretty broad and accessible for everybody, no matter what your health needs were. And then I also just love for you to be able to be creative with it and make it really fun in your own. So yeah, the
And the fact is,
challenges.
because there's 22, that
Yeah.
if everyone wants to do all of them, then you'd have a
Yeah.
couple of months to do. But
Yeah.
it's just as well you could just look down there and think, well, I fancy this one, and then the next
Uh-huh.
month, oh, perhaps I'll have a go
Uh-huh.
at that one. So take it
Yeah.
at your own pace, do whichever ones kind of tickle your fancy, whichever ones will move you to the place where you want to be. Because I think
Exactly.
that's what I got from you when you
Yeah.
suggested it. The idea that we all have ways we want to move forward in our lives and in our kitchens, and that we can support, encourage, and help each other by
Hmm.
this kind of list of ideas that then
Yes.
we can take and interpret if and when we want to this year, and share those with us and share with the rest of the community, which will be really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes we just need a little push, you know?
Yeah.
Like I enjoy the reading challenge, not because I hate reading and it forced me to read, but because I love reading. And I just needed someone to nudge me and say, try reading a Greek tragedy. You've never read one before.
Mm.
Okay. I read it and I loved it. Oh, it's depressing, because it's a Greek tragedy, but, I loved the process.
Yeah.
It was art. Okay. So,
Hopefully none of these challenges will have our listeners in tears.
oh man. And I know I've seen this with lots of different challenges that are out there, or when I say something, try this, and people sometimes need permission.
Mm.
So if it says on here, make a ferment, or try something new to you, and somebody might say, well, I did such and so, does that really count? This you are the boss in your kitchen. You're the
It
head chef.
counts.
You're calling the shots. Yeah. So, you don't need our permission on is this going to count? In fact, in a way, I think the more wildly creative you get, the better.
Yeah,
The
me
more
too.
you go off the beaten path, the more exciting it is. So there's lots and lots of ways to interpret all of these. Do you want to run through a couple
Mm.
of them, Allison, just so people have an
Yeah.
idea what's coming down?
Yeah, okay. So we've put them all together in a PDF document, which you can print out, stick up, or put somewhere on one of your devices to access whenever you want. And we'll have it on both of our Instagrams. And there's will be a link to it on my site, which is quite easy to remember, ancestralkitchen.com/challenge. If you write that in, you will see the list that I'm looking at now, and you will be able to have that throughout the year. So I'm just going to start at the top. The first one is make a fermented or lacto-fermented beverage. And if you
Hmm.
already ferment beverages, try a new one. So there are just so many fermented
I know.
drinks.
It's a lot.
And, there's the usual water kefir, kombucha, all that kind of stuff that people know about. But there are alternatives. Like you said, if people don't like or can't have dairy, then there are many. There's, beet kvass, there's bread kvass, there's more unusual fermented drinks. And there's also the option of using grains as well, like you said, my suans or my boza. There's a
Hmm.
recipe on my site for Russian bread kvass. So if anyone wants
Oh
to
yeah,
kind of
I've seen that one.
experiment into that, that's a fabulous drink and really
Hmm.
easy to do if you've got rye sourdough around. And it's just to really, for people who haven't had a lacto-fermented drink before, to give it a go. And then for those who perhaps have a staple every day, to experiment and try something new, which I
Hmm.
which I really like. Okay, number
Yeah,
two
and if
is
you
go on.
even
Yeah.
Allison, even if you're doing say you already make kombucha and you
Mm.
want to do challenge number one, but you don't want to do something besides kombucha. Maybe you've never second fermented, or maybe you've never tried flavoring it a different way, or maybe you've tried never bottled it, or
Yeah, that's
used
a
a
great
different
idea.
tea. Just do whatever. Like make it fun and make it challenging.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of people who don't second ferment water kefir, who just have it in the jar and then
Yeah,
ask me
me.
why it's not fizzy. So yeah, no, get some bottles and second ferment what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you can do that with any of the fermented drinks. You can even
Hmm.
do that with beet kvass if you want. You can put a bit of sugar in it at the end and
Oh
then put it
yeah.
in a
Oh gosh, so
pressurized
many
bottle, and then you've
options.
got bubbly beet kvass. So,
Hmm.
okay, number two is read a book mentioned on the podcast. And we've
Hmm.
just put out last week our books for 2022 episode. So
No
the show
shortage of
notes for
books.
that are kind of eye-rollingly long. So if you want to go back and look at any of those books, there's tons of inspiration in there. And we did a book podcast last year as well, and we talk about many books. So
Yeah.
that's a nice one, and I would love to hear if people are diving into some of the books that we've been diving into, because that's something
Yeah.
that I love to share with
Yeah,
people.
especially let us know, because Allison and I have already earmarked authors that we've said, boy, we want to interview this person. And if you're reading the
Mm,
book, and if you're reading a book and you think, man, I would love to hear their thoughts on this, maybe
yeah,
it's somebody
totally.
we've already kind of had our eye on. So let us know. And
Yeah,
there's
that's a really
books,
good
I
point.
think there's books listed, Allison, in every single one of our show notes. So
Yeah,
you can
I
go to
think you're
any show
right.
notes and
Yeah, totally. Number three is find and make a bread that works for your family.
Mhm.
So we wanted to put a bread one on here, but Obviously, that doesn't have to be wheat. It doesn't have to be a grain that's got gluten in it. It could be a lower gluten grain like rye. There's some recipes for rye breads on my site.
Hmm.
It could be spelt, obviously, the grain that I love. But it also could be a gluten-free bread or even a lectin-free bread. Or perhaps there are breads on the GAPS diet. I know because I made
Yeah.
them when we were on it.
Yeah.
So whatever works for you and your family, I think finding one bread recipe that you can just repeat and after a few
Hmm.
weeks you've got down pat is so, so wonderful for you to have with your family because it's something that you can just make maybe 2 or 3 at a time and then
Hmm.
even freeze some. And then you've got bread for, a week, 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and it's a staple here. And so if anyone wants support with that, obviously, I'm around for
Yeah.
questions on that one. But yeah, find something that works for you. That's
And it
number
doesn't
3.
have to be a loaf. That's kind of a European idea of bread is a
Yeah,
loaf. We
true.
picture that. But the teff pancakes that
Yeah,
Aaron taught us, that's a bread. There's all
yeah,
kinds of different flatbreads and different things that people might be doing. And if you do something with your challenge, like, oh, I decided to make it completely from local ingredients, or I decided to make it totally in the, tradition of, my ancestors or something. We want to hear all about that whenever you post about it, and use the
yeah.
hashtag Ancestral Kitchen Challenge, because I'll be crawling all over that hashtag to see everyone's
Yeah, if you
results.
learn something from someone in your family who's made it for a very long time, let us know
Hmm.
that for sure because I love hearing stories of breads that have been
Oh
passed
yeah.
down and made in families. So that would be wonderful to hear about. Okay, number 4, use some kitchen scraps that would normally be tossed. So that one, my brain automatically goes to vinegar and putting
Yeah.
apple cores in vinegar. But obviously,
Yeah.
there's tons of things you can do with kitchen scraps. You can put them in stocks. You can use them
Hmm.
in dinners. You can put bits into bread. What
Yeah.
other ideas have you got for that
Sourdough
one, Andrea?
discard. Um,
Yeah,
a lot of people throw that away,
yeah.
which, tells
Oh,
me they're
don't.
using cheap flour.
Yeah,
I
don't.
would never throw away something I made with my expensive flour. Um,
Mm,
or your kefir grains, Allison, like you put them into your smoothies.
yeah,
Those get thrown
yeah,
away a lot of the time.
yeah.
Kombucha, scobies, they can be
Gobies,
used for
yeah.
all kinds of different things. Those usually get thrown away.
Yeah, and obviously, if you've got bread left over and it's gone a bit stale, look up
Mhm.
all the thousands of recipes there are for using leftover bread,
Yeah.
not just in the Tuscan litany of recipes, but all over the world, and come up with it. I've got a recipe on my site for bread lasagna, which is really good with stale bread. So
Yeah.
anything like that works too. Awesome.
And if you've
Okay.
if you've
Yeah.
got rotten eggs, just throw them away. There's nothing you can do with those.
Thanks for that.
There's no
Okay.
redeeming.
Yeah. The next one is use a new to you kitchen tool and double the adventure if you find a vintage tool too. So yeah,
Mhm.
as anyone who's listened to the podcast knows, we really like kind of old stuff.
Oh yeah.
And so if you're able to find something at a flea market or a thrift store to use and bring it back
Yeah.
into active use in the kitchen, that's really cool. But other than
Mhm.
that, just if you haven't got a slow cooker and you've always wanted one and you've got the means to be able to
Hey,
get yourself one,
this is
have
your
a go with it,
excuse.
that kind of thing. So
I
do you want to
need
carry
a
on? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I need a freeze dryer, so I've never used one.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that on this
Yeah.
one, the only thing that really pops into my head is, of course, you can go to any kitchen gadget store and find like a banana slicer or something you've never used before.
Mm,
But
mm.
it's the reason why I threw in there about the vintage tool thing is because when you just kind of comb through the little antique markets or whatever, then that's where I pick up all kinds of random kitchen things and I'm staring at it. I'm like, what is this? And I take it home and then I start searching on the internet and I've found some really bizarre fermentation containers and things like that doing that. Um,
I have to
sometimes
go
it's
shopping with you.
yeah. Sometimes you find nothing. And then
Mm.
other times I found really cool like kraut hammers, a really cool old one. I found this huge old gigantic, like welded together ladle that I'm still afraid to use
Mm.
for food, but looks really cool
Yeah.
hanging on the wall. So yeah, find a random vintage tool, and maybe you find the tool first, and then you have to reverse engineer, figure out
Yeah.
what it's for. It can be hard to go out looking for a specific tool. Like, I'm looking for a marrow scraper. Good luck. But if
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
go shuffle through those little boxes of silverware and things like that, you'll find just weird things.
Yeah,
Okay,
take photos and show us.
let's move on. Let's do the next one.
Yeah, what's the next one? You do the next few.
Okay, cook with a spice you've never used before. That was you, Allison.
Yeah, well, that was me and my sumac, wasn't it? Late
Yeah.
last year, I think. Really, I was just completely in love with sumac, and I've done
Yeah.
some research since then, and it's just like the most medicinal herb I've ever heard of, I think.
I
But
think
yeah,
that's going to be the
anything.
one I'm going to use
There's
for
so many
for my
spices out
challenge.
there. Another one that I really love that is really not quite as well known as perhaps like its cousins, like cinnamon, is mace.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I
That is a
love
good
using
one.
mace.
Mhm.
That's really good in muffins. Goes so well with sweet potato. I
Yeah.
could go on.
Okay, in the
But
last
yeah.
2 years, I've really gotten obsessed with cassia.
Oh yeah.
I
Okay.
had never used that before. I mean, I guess I'd heard the name because it's mentioned in the Bible a ton. It's like in every
Mhm.
blend, all over the place in there. But so anyway, cassia, I've been really loving that. It's really cinnamon like, really hot and spicy. So I've been putting it actually in drinks a lot. So
Nice.
that's a fun one.
Okay. What's next?
Exchange a recipe with someone in another country, snail mail or electronic mail. So if you don't know
Mm.
someone in another country, you're going to have to meet someone in another country. Depending on where you live, it could be me or
Yeah.
Allison. We volunteer. But
Hmm.
find someone in a different country, or maybe you have a friend over there. And I put snail mail or electronic mail because sometimes it's just not realistic to be able to actually physically mail something. But if you want to, and if you can, I think it's really precious to um,
Yeah.
take the time to maybe print out or write out some cards or recipes and put them together. Uh, You only have to send at least one if you want to, do the challenge, but do whatever you want with this. I just felt like it could be a great chance to explore each other's cuisines and regional
Yeah.
favorites.
Yeah. I've done that quite a lot this year, and it's been one of the most
Hmm.
satisfying things that I've done so
Yeah.
last year.
Well, that's
Because
actually what made me
I've
think of
learned
it was
something from some person
yes,
who was steeped
yes.
in that kind of culture
Hmm.
that I just would not have learned before. It was just amazing.
Exactly. Listeners have a treat coming later on this month, but it was actually you and Naomi's recipe exchanges that made me think of this, because watching the
Yeah.
way you were swapping info
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
number 8 is another one that's close to my heart. Ask an elder for a recipe from the past and listen to their memories about food and life.
Mhm.
So that is Allison, let's talk about this one for just a minute. I want to spend a minute on this
Yeah.
one. Can you?
Yeah.
I know that listeners heard you mention this on the podcast, but can
Mm.
you talk about the book that you found? Um,
Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit last week, but I'm reading a book called Chewing the
mhm,
Fat, which is written by a lady in this country who is a professor at Siena University, but basically who went round, it was written about 5 years ago, and interviewed a ton of very, very elderly women from all different parts of Italy and from all walks of life. So some of
mm,
whom lived literally, with one suit of clothing for the whole of their childhood, literally,
wow.
and didn't have shoes and lived very close to the hunger line, completely scavenging for food, and some of whom were aristocratic and who lived in huge palazzos. And she talked to them, she let them talk, she gave space for them to talk and share about their childhood and the 20 years of fascist rule is what she concentrated on. So from 1922 into the early 1940s. And the stories are just astounding. I'm about
Hmm.
a third of the way through the book. And what I am learning from, firsthand kind of reported from these women about how they lived and how they actually ate, not how the world thinks, Italian
Hmm.
nonnas ate when they were younger.
Hmm.
And hearing their stories around the food, how they got their food, what they did with their food, why they cooked like this, who they shared their food with. And each woman who's interviewed gave a recipe at the same time as a long interview. And the recipes, just reading them, it's completely different from reading them on their own in a book. because
Yeah.
they come to life as part of this sort of description of this woman's life and who she is and what she went through. And I think that, kind of informs this one that you've just read, that there's so much knowledge and wisdom in the fingers and the bodies and the minds of the elderly women who we do have still some of them around us. We've lost a lot of it probably, but there are still people around us who hold wisdom that we don't necessarily have access to, and that if we don't go find it, it's potentially going to get lost. And that's what astounds me about this book that I'm reading, that all of this just wouldn't have been documented and wouldn't have been known.
Mm-mm.
And if that woman hadn't spent months and months and months of her life going around interviewing women and working through the interviews and sharing this stuff and trying to get it published. And I think it's easy in our busy lives, and also sometimes, it's not the easiest thing to do to talk to an elder. Sometimes we're intimidated. Sometimes it's difficult perhaps to understand them because we perhaps speak a different language to them because we're 50 years younger than them. But there is so much that is waiting to be passed on and shared, and so much wisdom, knowledge, joy, just everything. And I think the more we can do that, the more we'll have to pass on. And it needs to be done, because in 5 years' time, so many of those women will have passed on. In 10 years' time, many, many more. And we're moving to a time now where certainly my parents were a supermarket generation. They bought all of their food from a supermarket. And my nan didn't, but my nans have gone, and they didn't really pass much on to my mother. And therefore, I don't have anything of that kind of wisdom of their lives before supermarkets. And so the more we can do it, the more wonderful it will be, and the more we'll be able to kind of salvage as much as we can from women's wisdom in the past. I'll get off my soapbox now because I'm quite passionate about that.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really big one. Here, I'm going to read a little snippet out of the book. Actually, I have it in front of me, Chewing the
Okay.
Fat,
Yeah.
and I'll link it in the show notes so people can see it. But this um, woman that she's interviewing was born in 1920 in, I don't know how to say this, Ovanengo. I don't know how to say it. Somewhere in Italy. But so these are the sorts of memories that you'll hear. And one thing that I like about this book that I noticed as I was starting kind of poking through it was that she's really written down the way they were saying it. So
Yeah.
she didn't hyper polish what they said. It kind of comes through in the sort of disjointed way that sentences look. Not disjointed, but a little bit the way somebody talks. So she says, here's what the woman says. There was too many mouths to feed in our house, so breakfast was watered down milk and café de Hollande. It isn't around anymore, so it probably wasn't very good. But when you are hungry, you don't notice so much how things taste. If that is what there was, you ate it. We weren't fussy. We were lucky to have bread in the morning, because being in the heart of polenta country like we was, lots of folks had polenta for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Part of the bracciante pay on our farm was wheat. We threshed the grains ourselves and hauled the sacks off to the local mill to be ground. And just in that little casual paragraph, there's so many things. What you how did you thresh the grain? So many questions. And here she has the recipe, how to prepare snails.
Yeah, I saw that. And snails are something that I've always struggled with. I have eaten them before several times, but I struggle with them.
I
And I
don't think I've
remember
ever
reading
had them
about
actually.
them in the part last year in Honey from a Weed, Patience Gray's book,
Hmm.
and going and finding a blog of someone who'd cooked them, and just seeing them all in my garden, our little patio garden. There's just snails everywhere.
Ah,
So you can understand, if you're hungry, they're meat,
yeah, that's
if you're
absolutely
hungry.
true.
But it might be a while before I get to that one. I don't think that's a challenge on the on the list of challenges, is it?
No, the
Cook
only time we
snails.
mentioned snails was snail mail. So
Yeah.
you're okay there. So that'll be a really good one. I really hope that some treasures are shared. And I know, like Allison, I didn't say on here, ask your elder, because some of us don't have our own
Yeah.
elders around
Yeah.
anymore. So, you may need to find somebody else's elder and
Mm,
ask for their memories. Okay.
mm.
Number 9 is make a broth. Oh my goodness, endless choices here. Vegetable broth, bone broth, meat stock, really whatever you want to do. This you could coincide with use up, but like garbage scraps from your kitchen. You could do both those challenges together in that.
A fish stock as well, obviously. That's one that's a bit
Oh yeah, that's a
perhaps
good
more
one.
challenging. But if you go to a
Hmm.
fishmonger, generally they're getting rid of fish bones and fish heads
Oh
because they
yeah.
just cut them off
Oh yeah.
for the customers. So when I used to live in the coast, on the coast of Cornwall before we moved here, we used to often go to the fishmongers and just get all their heads and then put them in the stock pot and make a broth, which was delicious because you don't often get fish stock.
Yeah.
You know, you don't.
Yeah.
You're not used to it, and it really does make a big difference if you're making a dish like that.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, yeah, I love fish stock. That's a good one. Great one. All
Mm.
right, number 10, put together a few of your favorite recipes and gift to a friend, snail mail or electronic mail. Okay,
Hmm.
I almost didn't keep this one because we have exchanged a recipe with someone in another country and I thought people might think they were too similar, but they're not similar. I
Mm.
wanted to make sure that people knew that, the value of both seeking out somebody in another country, but also um, you know, putting together a couple recipes that you make all the time and just giving them to someone who maybe doesn't even expect them. This isn't an exchange. This is just a gift. So
Mm.
that could be that I'm thinking I've got my sister on the other side of the country. Maybe I'll put together a couple of the staples that we make in our house. I'll just type them out or write them out and send them
Hmm.
to her, in a really nice envelope or something as a surprise. Of course, I could put it together in a, email and email it to her as well. So, two sort of similar, but I thought worth keeping as separate.
Yeah, no, I agree. Gift is different to exchange, very
Yeah,
definitely.
totally.
For sure.
Totally.
Shall I carry
Is it?
on? We're up to number
Yeah.
11 now, aren't we? Okay,
Yep.
so number 11 is make a ferment. And if you ferment a lot, make something new to you. So this is different from the beverage because it's not necessarily a drink. It could be anything. You could be going along the fermented vegetables, which of course we know there are many. But you could try a meat cure. You could go adventurous and try some misos or something with
Hmm.
koji. You could work on some grains. So if you've never had fermented porridge before, go ahead and try that. Um, there are videos on my site that will talk you through that. Any form of ferment that is, just make something that's either your first ferment or something that's new to you regarding fermentation.
Hmm.
Okay,
I think
you want to
I
say
think
something about that? Yeah.
Chelsea Green. I'm looking to make
Mm.
sure I'm correct, but I think they're coming out with a koji book, or they just did one or the other. I'm looking up like a
Okay.
book all about the koji ferment. I mean, you can read a lot of that online too. Um,
Yeah, well, that's
oh
something
yeah,
amazing to dip
koji
into if you've not tried
alchemy is what he
koji.
calls it. Yeah.
Mm.
And my uncle always says, you can make anything with koji ferment. He's like, throw it in your
Yeah.
kimchi. So there's
Yeah.
lots of creative ways to use it, not just, this real, laboratory themed fermentation.
No, I
Um,
agree.
yeah. Okay. Number 12, prepare a
Hmm.
dish or meal that would have been known to locals in your area in the past. Okay. I was trying to be a little bit specific in the verbiage here because this may not be your direct genetic
Yeah.
ancestry. This is the region where you live.
Yeah.
In a way, we would all be like, oh, sorry, I just kicked the chair. um, Getting really excited over here. Um, in in times past, people never traveled more than a short distance away from where they grew up, right? So, um, everybody was in their genetic and like
Yeah.
regional history area. So
Pool.
the things
Yeah.
you made were grown there because nobody was going very far away. Nobody was hauling things in or out. And everybody who you were descended from, lived and died there, right? Well,
Yeah.
we don't live that way anymore. The world changed and people move around to different areas, which is fun and exciting. And what people did was they carried the traditions with them. So a lot of times, if you really research like a regional dish, it only goes back like 100 years. It doesn't go back very far. You'll have to decide for yourself how far back you want to go. I'm going to try and seek something that would have been native to the area in terms of it was what grew here, it was what naturally existed here when people lived
Hmm.
here before.
Okay.
which means I'll probably be fermenting fish or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so it's up to you if you want to, use something that was transplanted in, or how far back you want to go. I'm going to try to go back at least far enough to, you know, the recent enough history. Obviously, there's a certain point where we just can't know what happened,
Yeah.
but I'll try to go back far enough that it was something that at least grew here, as far as we know, fairly native to the region.
Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with.
Yeah, me too.
That'll be
I'll
really
probably
nice.
use that book. What was it called? Renewing American
Ah, the one you
Traditions, or
mentioned last
the one I
week. Yeah.
mentioned last time.
Yeah.
I'll try to find the title and mark it, because if anyone listening is in the U.S., hello, then it has um, that book has recipes from every region of the United States, and they tried to
Mhm.
go back pretty far too. I mean, some things, like, there's a potato that's considered native to this area, but technically it was brought to South America by the Spanish, you know, back in the
Okay.
1600s or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
it gets kind of native, but not.
Yeah. 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 You
So
could go down real
yeah,
wormholes with
yeah,
that, can't you?
yeah. You can see
Amazing.
how picky you
Yeah.
want to be. But if we use the same standard that they use for like heirloom plants and heritage animals, they
Yeah.
say, like, oh, if it was pre-industrial agriculture, then it counts. So that's
Okay.
probably going to be a good measuring stick, is if it's pre-industrial agriculture, it's pretty close.
So I'm going to take number 13 because I get
Oh, this is
excited
all
by number
you.
13. Prepare a meal or a dish using offal. And if you're using offal quite regularly in your kitchen, find some other piece of offal that you're not used to cooking.
Okay,
So,
Allison. So it looks like you're down to
yeah.
the sex organs of a bull at this point. I don't
I
know
don't
what
know
else
what's
you
left.
haven't tried.
No, yeah, it's actually true. I don't really know what much is left. Okay, so there's a recipe on my site or there's not. There's a recipe linked on my site to slow cooked beef heart, which is a great place to
That is
start
a good
if
place to
you're
start.
doing something kind of a bit different. Naomi, who, as you hinted at, we will have on the podcast in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Her site, which we will link in the show notes, has a wonderful beef liver pate recipe, which uses allspice berries. And the flavour of the liver that a lot of people don't like is completely kind of disguised by the allspice
She's
berries.
addicting.
So yeah, her recipes and her pictures are amazing.
Ugh.
And so if you wanted to have a go with liver, but you've kind of been put off by the taste of
Hmm.
liver in the past, have a go with that liver pate.
Yeah.
And then there
Yeah.
are tons of other recipes. I mean, if you want to try heart's great in stew. It's great stir fried. If you want to have kidneys, there's English steak and kidney pie. There's recipes for brains. There's recipes for lungs. There's recipes for spleen. There's a spleen crostini, which is eaten quite a lot here
Mm.
in Tuscany, which I made last year. There's tripe, obviously, as well, and Tuscany has a very long recipe tradition of making various different tripe dishes. There's
Hmm.
so many, and this is such an under publicized part of meat eating, that there is a huge percentage of an animal that is not flesh, and we should be eating it. It was the
Hmm.
thing that hunters ate first when they made a kill because of the nutrients. And it is the offal is the most nutrient dense part of an animal. And it is so cheap. And when you buy a
Yeah.
massive heart, like a beef heart, it's like, 2.5 kilos
Hmm.
in European weights. And it will
You
last you
lost us.
for such a long time. It's so
Hmm.
economical, so easy, and really just so tasty too. There's no need
Yeah.
to be afraid of it. And yeah, I certainly take this one on. If anyone has issues with offal that they kind of want help with, then please come and ask me, because
Hmm.
yeah, I'm an offal warrior. I think we should be eating more offal.
She is. She's the queen. Well,
So
I agree
yeah.
with you, Allison. What you said, the heart is a really good place to start, especially a beef heart. If somebody's not
Mm.
accustomed to organs and they just want to have eat an organ straight up,
Yeah.
because a heart is a muscle. So it's the most similar in terms of texture and
Yeah.
everything to the muscle meat that people are accustomed to eating. I really can't figure out why offal fell out of favor, both, I guess. Because in
I
my head,
think
I'm
it's
thinking, well,
I think it's
but
because of its cheapness, that it was associated with the poor
mm,
because the poor could
oh,
only
you're probably
afford it.
right.
And then
Yeah.
when a kind of upwardly mobile lifestyles kicked in pretty much after the war,
Yeah.
I think it was just people look at it and think, oh, the poor people ate that. I don't want to eat
You know
that no
that you're
more.
right. There are a lot of foods that because they were the food that the poor ate, they fell out of favor.
Mm,
Like whole grain bread, for instance, like a
yeah,
bread that's
yeah,
not a white flour. Um, or different like bone broths and ferments and things. In my
mm,
head though, I always think, well, from a like a slaughterhouse perspective, wouldn't you want to sell every single ounce of everything you could and make the
yeah,
most amount of money?
yeah.
But maybe it was driven more by um, you see a lot of like the Edwardian era and stuff like that, people mimicking the the rich and famous, like the
Mm,
earls and things like that. I was thinking, Allison, the other day, because I was watching Downton Abbey again, and the daughter gets married, and in their fancy house or whatever,
mm,
and I was thinking, huh, so we're just all peasants, and when we rent these estates, we're just like being like trying to be an earl, like this is
mm.
my estate, and this is where I would get married, like we're just trying to imitate the whatever. What do you guys call them? The peers? Is that what you call them?
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
peerage. So funny. So maybe with the organ things, it's like, yeah, we're gonna imitate the earls, and we're gonna rent a fancy house to get married, and then we're gonna eat the muscle meat, not the liver.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
but
think
they
some of
also
it's
ate
just
posh things like kidney
it's
soup,
a
right?
natural reaction to what happened in the war because there were so many food
Mm,
shortages, and if you could get away from that, you want to really. If you lived
yeah,
through
you're
it,
right.
it must have been horrendous.
Yeah.
But now we are not there. We are somewhere else, and
Mm-hmm.
we have issues with industrialized meat and transportation, and we should be eating this offal. It's wonderful, and there is a
Yeah.
litany of recipes from every culture using
Oh
offal,
yeah.
and
Every
so
single one.
as a creative act, it is something that's wonderful to kind of, oh, I can use this recipe, I can try this, I can try that. It's something that
Uh-huh.
that can spark creativity as well.
Yeah.
It's being
Absolutely.
tasty.
Well, Rob
Oh
already
well.
achieved it by eating the eyeball off of your.
Oh yeah, our sheep's head. Yeah, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do
Okay,
that.
let's do 14. It kind of
Okay.
kind of spins off of that one. Use fat in a new way, make it extra special, and use a fat you have never tried before. Okay, I
Mm,
I worked back and forth on how to word this because I was like, well, what have people not used? So it may be that you haven't done something with fat, like Allison, you talked about um, spreading lard on bread.
yeah.
Well, this was just when we were chatting the other day. It wasn't on a podcast episode,
Mm,
but you were saying that you brought lard and a loaf of bread, and people said, wow, putting lard on bread, so
yeah.
that could be using fat in a new way, something as simple as that.
Mm,
Or it could be also using a fat you've never tried before. I was thinking, all the old books in American history talk about, how they used bear grease for everything. I was like, hey, maybe I can get my hands on some bear grease and try that
oh
out.
no, there's other there are there's duck fat, there's goose
Oh my
fat, there's
goodness.
ghee, which a lot of people have never tried. You might have tried
That's true.
butter,
That's
but not
true.
tried ghee. And there's other ways to use things. I mean,
Oh,
browning
there's goose
butter is
fat and turkey
something
fat and
that I hadn't done for ages, and so it's and there's chicken fat as well. Obviously, if you've
mhm,
got a
mhm.
really
Yeah, yeah.
nice
What did you
fatty
say it was
chicken,
called? You said chicken fat has a name.
smolts. I don't know how you pronounce it. It might be schmaltz. I don't know.
Schmaltz. Schmaltz.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so I should mention this, Allison. Lexi had seen something. She sent it to me, and then I sent it to you, and then we kind of discussed it. It was somebody saying, "Don't use rendered chicken fat. It's
Mm.
oxidized or something," and we were like, "Wait, what?" So um, I'm assuming she's maybe referring to if you cook it at an excessively high heat for a really long time. I'm not sure. Although then I
Mm.
feel like it largely emulsifies into the broth at that point and you don't really separate
Mm.
it. But
Mm.
I do take the fat off of my broths and things, and I use it for cooking. Like
Yeah,
we
me too.
took our turkey that we cooked for Thanksgiving had so much fat. I mean, I think I skimmed off 2 pints, and I used it to make mayonnaise, and so then the next
Oh,
day we had turkey fat mayo. It was
that
so
sounds
good.
lovely.
And of course
Gosh,
the
that sounds
turkey
good.
cooked. Oh, it was really good. The turkey cooked with sage and everything like that. So there
Yeah,
was all
so
this
all of
really
those
good
flavors.
infusion of flavor in it. And then I actually used some of our preserved eggs from the summer to make the mayo. It was
Mm,
so delicious, Allison. Like I
sounds
could have just
yum.
eaten it. It was that
Yeah,
good.
so that's a really good example of using fat in a new way. I've just suddenly come
Mhm.
popped into my head the idea of confit, cooking up some meat and then
Oh yeah.
preserving it in fat. There's something in that book that we were talking about earlier on where
Yeah.
the pig was slaughtered and then bits of the pig were literally preserved under fat. So that's another different way of
Hmm.
using fat. It kind of
Oh yeah. Or
spirals
using
out when I
the
start thinking.
Naomi's biscuit recipe with the cracklins. That would be
Yeah,
using fat in a new way.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna link that in
You
the
got to
notes.
make a list. Quick, go to your pad and
I've
write
got a
it
list
down.
going.
Okay, so where are we up to?
Okay, so
Let's go
now we're
back
on to
to.
15, number 15.
Okay, 15 is make a home remedy, herbal blend, or supplement. So this is could seem intimidating, but it's not. We just
It's
interviewed
not.
Stephanie. This will be tea for our patron feed. And she's a
Hmm.
herbalist, and she approaches it really in such a down to earth way that you've got these herbs in your garden. You're growing rosemary, you're growing oregano, you're growing mint. Just take it and use it and make it into a tea. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Get to know these even, really common herbs have fabulous effects on our health and can be used in simply in teas,
Yeah.
And I think that's a really nice inclusion in the challenge that we could take something that we might have not used in that way and make a remedy with it or make a herbal tea with it, make something with it. So that's what I'm going to be doing for that one, I think,
That's
using some
that's
herbs from my
actually part
garden.
of why I wanted to put this in. I was really keen on having this challenge item in here, Allison, was because I do think that sometimes we think it's complicated because
Mm,
most of our health solutions we've turned over entirely to an industry that profits off of us being super sick all the time.
yeah.
And not going to go into a wormhole on that. I'm just saying, like, we've turned over all our autonomy to somebody else who may or may not, we don't know, have our best interests at heart, right? But what I was hoping people would do is say, okay, well, I want to, what is it that I want to remedy? Okay, well, I want to sleep. And so then you're going to have to start researching
Mm,
herbs for relaxing and sleeping or something, right? Then you'll say, well, I'm really interested in tulsi and lemon balm and lavender. So I'm going to make those three into my herbal blend and make myself a tea. And I'm just going to see how it goes, right?
mm.
That's my hope. And I'm also figure that because home remedies used to just like if Allison, do you have any or have you looked through any old cookbooks? Not really ancient. Well, I guess
No, I
maybe.
know, I know, I
But
kind of know what you're going to say, in that
you know what I'm going to
the
say. Every
discussions and
single one of
podcasts that
them.
I've been on, they have recipes and they
Yes.
have health recipes in the same
Yes.
books. They're the
Yep.
same
There's
thing. They
literally
come from the
no
same place.
separating.
Yeah.
There's no every single cookbook that I have before 1950 and some of them after, but every single one from before 1950, and I collect them, so I have a number. Um, they all have, cakes, biscuits and breads, soups, gravies, home remedies, foods for sick people,
Yeah.
recipes for someone who's trying to gain weight. There's always something for somebody who's trying to gain weight. and and it's just a part of the kitchen activities because
Yeah.
you would take the same things that you use for making dinner and maybe concentrate them into a tea as opposed to having them sprinkled throughout your tomato sauce, right?
Yeah.
So what you'll notice when you're making a home remedy, you're like, wait a minute, oregano and thyme and sage? That's what I made in my spaghetti last night. Like, yeah, yeah, it is. Your food is so full of healing properties and should be. Of course, if you're using imitation sage flavor or 100-year-old dried sage from
Yeah.
a chemical farm, you're not getting a lot of benefits. But if you're taking the sage from your backyard and strewing it over your turkey or you know stewing it into your tomatoes, then yeah, you will be getting some wonderful benefits from that. So there's a lot of crossover. It's almost hard to separate the two, but here we have home remedy, herbal blender, supplement, whatever you want to interpret that as. And we also, Allison did the um, episode a while back, and I'll link it for where we talked about fire cider and the recipe for that. So
Yeah, of course,
that's a
because
good
that
one.
sort of thing
That
comes in
could
there as
also
well.
that could
Yeah.
also check off your make a new ferment. You could check off make a new ferment at the same time as that. Okay,
Yeah,
let's do
great
number
idea.
16. This, of
Okay, so
course,
yeah, go on.
there's people who do entire challenges, of 100 items built only out of number 16. We've just got one, so you pick what you want. But this is preserve something. How you want to preserve it? You can can it, freeze it, dry it. You can ferment it, freezer dry it. You can lime it, pickle
Yeah.
it. You can cellar it, buried in the ground, put it in
Yeah.
ashes. There's lots of ways you can preserve things.
Yeah, wonderful. I think all of those things are worth exploring. And like you said, they could be a challenge in and of themselves.
Yeah.
And all of them have such roots in the past for health and for economy and keeping food good. So I love that one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
I think
17 too. Go on then.
Oh, I was just going
I'm
to say, I
excited.
think there's an Instagram. I'm trying to remember her name. I think it's called Three Rivers Homestead. I'll try to find it and link it. But she does a challenge every year. Or I think she does it every year, but it's called Every Bit Counts. And she just challenges you to, like, throughout the summer, literally preserve something every single day, even if it's like 2 jars of something or a tiny bag of something
Wow.
dried. She just wants you in the mindset of every bit counts. All right, number 17.
Yeah. Make
You
a
say this
recipe
one,
you've
Allison.
avoided or been intimidated by. I like this one, just to get my teeth into it. So we all know, we've looked through recipe books and we've like, ooh, crikey, that looks really nice, but I'm a bit scared about this. And I've heard a lot of people say it about the beef heart recipe, that I really wanted to cook a beef heart, but it's just this big thing and I don't really know what to do with it. So yeah, take something that you know you want to make in your kitchen and commit to tackling it and bringing it to life. And that's something that I love that, because I love getting my teeth into kind of strange
So
things.
you could double up this with the offal if you wanted to, or you could keep them separate
true.
if you're trying to give yourself more things to do. And you have the whole year to do this challenge. So this isn't one of those like crank it out in a month type scenarios, because I can't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think you'll do, Allison? What comes to your mind when you say something you've avoided or been intimidated by?
Crikey. Probably something with koji, because
Me too.
I've kind of avoided koji.
I've
Not
been
because
very
I've been
intimidated by it.
intimidated by it,
I have.
but because I just am doing too many things. And I think it's another chapter. It's like, I know this, like when I started making sourdough, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just overwhelming. And I remember saying to Rob, I got these books out of the library, and I remember saying to Rob, I can't do this. It's too much to learn. Send all the books back to the library. And the next morning I woke up and I thought, I can't do that. It's going to happen. No matter what I do, this is going to happen. And I feel like that's kind of where I'm at with koji a bit, that I haven't quite got enough space in my life to fit it in, or I've been pushing it away left, right and centre. And it would be really nice to actually kind of play with it. So it might be koji for me.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I've avoided it or been intimidated by it or whatever, or I've created it into a monument in my mind, but definitely is something that it's because I think, like you indicated with the sourdough, I know it's a wormhole. And once I go down, well, me and wormholes, it's very hard for me to get out.
Yeah.
It's the nature of my personality, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 18, make a meal from ingredients sourced entirely from your region. So I didn't want to say make a dish. I wanted to say make an entire meal. So you're in this a dish, just one dish might not be challenging enough, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because you could be like, I got the beets from the farm down the road and the rosemary from my garden. Wazam, I wanted it to be a challenge. So make an entire meal from ingredients sourced entirely from your region. I guess it's up to you if you want to get really picky about something like salt. I would say it's still fine to get salt wherever you get your salt, but if you want to go, full Tudor monastery farm and distill your own salt, I guess go for it. But what do you think about this one, Allison? Does this go along with our supermarkets episode?
Yeah, oh, completely. And we'll hopefully be revisiting that later this year. But
Over and over.
it's so important because it transcends any other form of kind of diet rules that the world puts out there for us,
Oh,
kind of
yes, absolutely.
vegan or ancestral or paleo. No, we live in a location, and to avoid so much of the issues in our food chains, what we need to do is eat from that region. And
Hmm.
that's how it would have happened all the time until really
Sure.
very recently in our history. And so the more we can get familiar and acquainted and dig in to what's around us, the better it is for us, for
Yeah.
the communities around us, and for the world, I think. So,
And
yeah.
when you work with the ingredients from around you, Allison, I know you have found this, and I know everybody who's doing this, working on this, will say the same thing. You start to find, number one, what the gaps are, where
Yeah. Yeah.
where like the commercial market has kind of created a void in the
Yeah.
local market. And then you also start to find why people ate certain things in an area. So um, you there are foods that we can eat that help us with the specific environment. Maybe we have a lot of sun and
Yeah.
we eat things that help us, um, process that sun through our, like,
Mm.
eating foods high in vitamin D, or, um, you know, there's really intense ferments that you find in regions that get quite cold, because you've got months out of the year with not
Mm.
really anything growing, and you're literally relying on crocks of food that have to be fairly nutrient dense, or you're all dying of scurvy and
Mm.
salt
Mm.
poisoning. So it's definitely interesting finding things sourced entirely from your region, and this would be a fun one. Of course, everybody's kind of working towards that, supermarket free lifestyle, but
Mm.
this would be a fun one to really visit intensely, every quarter at least, so you were seeing
Yeah.
what was happening around you. And this really puts you in tune with the pulse of the farming around you too. I mean, there was entire years of my life where I had no idea really that what the seasons were for things to grow around me. I couldn't have told you exactly when apricots were being harvested, because
Right.
I didn't really know. It was just like, oh, they're kind of here all summer. When you start eating regionally, you start realizing, oh my word, this only has like a week of harvest time. Like, it's
Yeah.
really like, what? I thought I had all summer. Like when I realized strawberries, like a lot of strawberries really only last for a couple weeks in like late spring, depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
And then there's different plants that you can pick off of longer. But I was like, wait a minute, I thought strawberries just kind of grew all summer long, and I just
Mm.
had no idea. So
Mm.
that'll be a fun one. And I want to see,
Yeah.
please, please post. I want to see.
Yeah, I want to see all the different vegetables. I know because so many vegetables kind of grow in different places, and I haven't even heard of half of them. So,
Oh my gosh,
yeah, if you've
yes.
got something particularly interesting, or just show us what is grown in your
Yeah.
region, because I don't know. Because
I
I
don't know
live in
either.
I live in Tuscany, and I grew up in the south of England. That's all I
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
I'd love to see what your world is. Which would be
It'd be
cool.
fun to see the meal and try to figure out where it was from.
Yeah, yeah, that would be a
That'd be cool.
game.
Yeah.
Okay, number 19. Okay, number 19 is spend a day without using the internet or social media, ideally screens at all. And explain why
Yeah.
you put this one in, Andrea.
Well, okay. This one, yeah, let's pull this one apart just a little bit. You might say to yourself, this has nothing to do with food, but I would say it has everything to do with food, and everything to do with our lifestyle. And oh, hold on, what's going on? This I'm going to link in the show notes Allison's episode, why I gave away my iPhone,
Mm.
because it's a good one. And if you're a patron definitely pop into the private patron podcast feed because there's an interview that I did with Rob that is really good, really, really good,
Mm.
talking more about screens and things like that. But one thing that I hear a lot is, wow, how do you have the time to do blah, 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 whatever you do? And one thing I've noticed is on the days that I get sucked into my phone, because it definitely happens to me, I get hardly anything done and definitely nothing creative happens and
Mm.
definitely nothing just off the wall that just came from the quiet boredom of
Yeah.
a mind that wasn't being occupied and entertained by something, wasn't consuming content of some form. It was just sort of stewing around. And I've also noticed, Allison, I don't know if we've talked about this or if it's true for you, but I feel
Mm.
like when I spend time, and this includes either long stretches of time or popping on and off, which, the more I stay off of my phone, the more I realize how unhealthy the frequent popping on and off is.
Mm.
um when I do that, there's this, uh, I don't know what you want to call it. The ancients would have called it a muse, or some sort of a creative, I don't know exactly what it's called, but there's this like spirit in me that ceases to produce when I spend a lot of time on a screen. Oh my gosh, I don't know if this is making any sense at all. But
No, well, I think I'm just going to put my 2 cents worth in here. I think
okay.
the phone and the screens take us out of our body into some kind of
Yes, yes,
virtual
yes, that's what
swirling,
it is.
swimming world, and we're in our heads all the time, and we're outside being distracted. And if we can take that away, not just for an hour, but if we can take it away for a longer stretch of time, so we can experience being without it,
Yes.
we have an opportunity to come back into our bodies more. And, then
Mm-hmm.
you go and spend time in the kitchen or going for a walk. That encourages that coming back into our bodies. And
Yeah.
it's only when we're in our own bodies that we have the possibility to listen and hear and have things come up that are actually of us, not from someone else. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think
Okay.
there is no kind of muse if you're out there doing that kind of
Right.
thing all the time. It needs concerted effort to just be with yourself, which,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we know is hard. It's hard to be with yourself because most people have a load of rubbish inside that has to be worked
Mm-hmm.
through. Life isn't easy, but it's
Yeah.
certainly worthwhile to experience it and to try to make. For me, it's been worthwhile to make it part of my life regularly because my life improves, my relationships improve, everything
Mm-hmm.
improves. So yeah, that's why
And I
it's in
want
there.
I want us all to get that feeling of when I dedicated myself to taking a day off or whatever, how much you can get done. And
Mm.
Allison, I'm almost done reading that Shakespeare bio. It's so good. I can't
Wow.
stop. But I keep thinking to myself, would he have accomplished all of this if he was checking his
Gosh,
email all the
no.
time, or, you know,
He would have be comparing himself to some other playwright probably and never have written what he wrote. And he would have been off on other
yeah.
people's ideas. I mean, just no, absolutely not.
No, it wouldn't have happened. And when you and I were just chatting about Christmas stuff and ideas and just fun stuff yesterday, and um, you said, I feel like I keep downloading these ideas for books.
Mm.
That was a computer terminology, but um, those downloads don't happen for me when I'm
Mm.
on the phone. I don't exactly know how to explain it, but it's like a connection to use another
Yeah.
computer terminology, gets blocked,
Yeah.
because it's filled with this, xenoestrogenic type, fake hormone, this fake idea
Yeah.
of the screen, and then the natural hormones, the real ideas can't function. I don't know. It's
Can't
it's
come through.
definitely something that will be fun for us to explore. So
What could be, this challenge could actually feed into that item in that, if you think,
yeah.
yeah, I'd like to do this and maybe I could do it twice a month. Well, okay,
Hmm.
perhaps
Yeah.
dedicate those 2 days to some of the other items on this list and do a recipe you've been intimidated with or do another ferment. And that gives you a kind of a motivation to stay away from it, because you're like, I'm going to do this
Yeah,
today. I'm going to turn my phone off and I'm going to leave it over there.
absolutely.
And then I'm going to do one of these challenges. And then I'll go back on tomorrow and I'll post the
Uh-huh.
pictures then.
It'll also push you into seeing what resources you have on hand. And um, for do you remember, Allison, a couple weeks ago there was like the social media blackout or whatever, like
Mm.
Instagram was down, and some people didn't even know because it wasn't that
No, I
long,
don't
but
think I knew. I don't think I was on that day.
I think it was on your Thursday or something, so you weren't on it anyways. But anyways, what happened, I heard a lot of people say this, people posted about this, and people said it to me. They said, oh my gosh, I realized all my recipes were saved on or pinned or whatever on
Ah,
Instagram.
okay. Okay.
And
That's
they said, I
clever.
realized I couldn't even make, my lasagna or whatever they were trying to do,
Mm.
without social media. And so when we first got out here, internet was here and there, or um, power was here and there. We were still figuring things out. And I immediately had to recognize, like, the day the chicken had her catastrophic health event, and I had to kill the first chicken out here on the farm because she was
Mm.
dying and in a
Mm.
horrible condition. And I didn't have access to the internet or anything. And I was like,
Ah.
well, I don't have any of the things you would normally use to kill a chicken. So how am I going to kill this chicken? And
Mm.
I took that Carla Emery book that I talked about on the book challenge episode, and
Mm.
or not book challenge, but just the book episode. And
Yeah.
I just looked up how she said to kill a chicken, so it was like in the book. So then I went out and I did it. And knowing what resources you have, like, can you even find a recipe without getting on the internet for, you know, cracklins or whatever it is you want to do? Like,
Mm.
what do you
Mm.
have on hand? That could be important for people to know.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point. Interesting point. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
we know what we both feel about that one. So we've got three
Yeah.
left, and
All right.
we're over an hour, so we're going to go through the last
What?
three. Yeah, I
Okay.
know. So much for keeping it to 35 minutes,
So
though.
much for that. All right.
Okay. So number 20 is introduce a new cookbook into your kitchen, which is
Okay.
always a joy to do. I know that everyone listening, generally that I speak to anyway, loves cookbooks. So go and find something that you're really inspired by and
Mhm.
play with in your kitchen, for sure. Number 21 is make something mentioned on the podcast. So yeah, I dread to think how many things we've mentioned over the last year. Thousands and thousands and thousands. See if there's something
Yes.
that you remember that you thought, oh yeah, I remember them talking about that a few months ago, and I remember wanting to do it. And then go do it.
Hmm.
And that would be really awesome to see something that we've talked about being made in your kitchens. I'd love to see the pictures of that one. And
Yeah.
then the last one is make a dish or meal your genetic ancestors would have made. So obviously for me, that's
Mm.
going to be different from the one that was earlier that the
Yeah.
ancestors who lived in your area around you would have made. And
Yeah.
I know my ancestry is Northern European. I did one of those 23andMe tests about a decade ago, I think. And so, yeah, that will be different for me. That will be going and finding something that
Yeah.
is not from the Italian liturgy where I live now, but something that comes from my
Hmm.
actual genetic ancestors, which will be
Yeah.
exciting. How
Yep.
about for you, that one?
Well, this one is, it's the episodes, not episodes. The challenges aren't really in any specific order, but I did put this one
Mm,
last because, to my mind, it's sort of the culmination of everything, because this is the Ancestral Kitchen podcast. And regardless of what you may think, you all have ancestors.
mm,
And everybody has an ancestor. You didn't get here on your own. So the difficult part for some of us might be finding out who the ancestors were. And that might be a challenge. I think
mm,
I've heard it said that most people don't know the names of anybody past their grandparents or
mm.
even their living grandparents. I do. And yes, you do. Jacob
Oh,
just said, I
that's
do.
sweet.
But I was laying in bed the other night trying to think, how far back can I go? And I was like, wow, I really don't know that many of my, great grandparents or great great grandparents' names, even though I've seen them before, but I'm not
Mm,
familiar with them. So finding out who your genetic ancestors are might be a little bit of a challenge, or maybe
Yeah.
our family was Irish, and you know that's all you want to know, and so you can just go back and search for some you know Irish traditional recipes or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. I mean,
Hmm.
again, I want to see all these recipes and I want to
Me
hear all the
too. Me too.
stories. It just is really exciting. So
Yeah.
I think what are the best ways for people to share what they're
Well,
doing through
you
the year
could
with this?
tag the podcast, Ancestral
Mm,
Kitchen Podcast,
yep,
or you could tag, Allison or
us.
myself.
Yeah,
You could tag all of us if you're really into
yeah.
tagging. um, you can use the hashtag
Okay,
Ancestral Kitchen
I'll
Challenge.
sign up for that. I'll make sure I'm signed up
Yeah,
to
yeah.
see that hashtag.
This all assumes you're on social media. If you're not on
Yeah.
social media, I took Allison and threw her out there. And I said to email it to Allison because she
Yeah.
actually checks her email. I'm really
Mm.
terrible about it. So send it to Allison at ancestralkitchen.com, and she shares the stuff with me. So um,
So we'll both
then
see it.
then we can share it on social media if you want us to, or if you just want to share it and let us see it. We don't have to put it online. But
Yeah, no, that's fine.
yeah,
I'd like to see it
just
anyway. And I know
yeah,
you'd
I,
like to
I
see
want to
it.
see it and enjoy it. So, and I put a little page after the ancestral
Oh, yeah, page 2.
challenge with just some lines, because sometimes, like, an Allison and I were sitting here, if I had my notebook or my printed page with me, I would have jotted down, like, on the intimidated by, I would maybe put koji. Like, I want to remember
Mm.
that that's what I was thinking about. Maybe it's
Yeah,
not exactly what
okay.
I'm going to do, but I just want to remember, you know.
Yeah, so if you want to go and get that PDF, remember it's up on my site, ancestralkitchen.com/challenge. So you could print that off now if you wanted and just go onto the second page and jot down some ideas of what you would like to do this year. And then maybe pin it up somewhere where you'll be reminded of it regularly. And
Hmm.
then when you're able and feeling enthused, yeah, get stuck in. It'll be such fun. I'm
Yeah.
gonna enjoy it.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
I love it, Allison.
That's great. Okay, well,
It's
thank
going
you
to be fun.
everyone for listening to our first bonus episode of the year, and I think there'll
Yeah,
probably be more because we've got a lot to
I hope
say
so.
this year. I
We do.
think.
A lot
Okay,
has
cool.
happened.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to seeing what you create and what everyone else creates this year using
Yeah.
this. And I'll speak to you soon, Andrea.
All right. You too, Allison. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.